My dad, as a child, found a decaying corpse. So I recently visited family in South Carolina for my father's funeral. And this story came up as we talked and shared memories at my cousin's house. My father's sister, Catherine, told me a story when my father was 10 and lived in New Caney, Texas with Catherine and some other family members. We also found some stuff online about the incident, which almost left her in tears. My father was walking to his school, which was near the 76 truck stop, and decided to cut through the stop to get to the school faster, and stumbled upon a decaying corpse on the tree line where trailers parked. There were clothes strewn everywhere, and even in some branches above the body. The police were alerted, and they found the body behind the truck stop. My father was obviously shaken and traumatized by the experience, but he never told me as a kid, nor did my mother. Nobody ever mentioned or referenced it. The most disturbing part of the story is the fact that the killer is still on the loose, and because of the corpse being near a truck stop, a possible serial killer. Man at the door. This happened about a year ago now on my 21st birthday. I still remember it as if it was yesterday. I suppose I'll give a bit of background. I was having a bit of a get-together for my birthday with my parents, my younger brother, and my older sister at my parents' house. Just so you know, my parents live out in the woods in the middle of basically nowhere, Oregon. At least how I see it anyways. I never really had any kind of weird feelings out there at their house before. However, this time, it was different. We all heard strange noises and noticed things around the yard were being moved around by seemingly nobody. My parents had a dog, and he would sometimes get jittery at night and would spend a lot of time just staring into the woods. We didn't really think much of it at first. That was until the third night, this very skinny white man with a very bushy beard and long ass hair came up to the door. The front porch light was very dim, making it very hard to see what he was wearing when I opened the door. The dog started barking aggressively at him, to which I shouted, "Quiet, Monty!" The man looked at the dog and then kicked him across the patio. I was in shock and told him to get the fuck off the property now or I'll call the police. He refused to leave and just sat there, staring at me, holding the door open. Then my dad came to the door. My dad at the time was 67 years old, but he looks 20 years younger than he is. He is honestly one of the fittest elderly people I know. He constantly works out and has been a vegan since I was 3, and I admire him for being so healthy. Long story short, my dad is really intimidating. He walked in front of me and asked, "What the hell is going on here?" To which I told my dad, "This crazy bastard came to the door, said nothing. Dog started barking at him, so kicked him across the patio, and I told him to fuck off." My dad loves that dog, and he started barking at the man to get the hell away. And why the hell would you do that to an innocent animal? The man, again, still just stood there. My dad started shouting physical threats like, "Hurt my dog again, and I'll repeat whatever you did to him against you twice over." To this man, just looked up at my dad, seeing my dad was at least half a foot taller than him, and brushed the hair around his eyes away. His eyes were so bloodshot, you almost couldn't tell where the start of his eyes were and where his skin was. He then had one of the creepiest smiles I'd ever seen, snarled and crooked teeth rotting in his mouth. "I like to see you try," he said. Then he just walked away into the darkness. My dad and I ran out to the patio, my dad going straight to the dog, and I went to turn on one of the floodlights that were all across the house and yard to see where the man had gone, and we couldn't see him anywhere. At the time, my sister was training to be a cop or investigator of some kind, and I remember something she had said to try and scare me. "They say that when someone goes missing, and there is no way they could have made it out of your sight in a short amount of time, they're right around the corner." I'm glad I remembered this, because the patio goes from the front door of my house out a few feet and ends at the garage door. I couldn't see past the wall of the garage, and then it hit me. Had to be planning something, so I turned around and yelled at my dad, "Grab the dog and get inside now." My dad didn't answer me, and got inside. I followed about 2 feet behind him. When we got inside, my dad asked me, "Did you see something?" I didn't actually know if he was there, but I just said some shit like, "Yeah, I heard him breathing," or something like that. I then told him to lock the door and make sure all the windows and doors are locked on the bottom floor, as I went to go lock the hatch to the basement that allows you in from outside. The house itself was fairly large, so I went as quickly as I could and came back up to help my dad make sure we were safe. Even though my dad has a few guns for when my cousins come over for shoot practice, he never wanted to have to use one on people. The next day was my actual birthday, which just means my girlfriend came over and my cousin stopped by for a bit, at about 8 p.m. or so, because it was a long drive for her from Cali to Oregon. I went to ask her if she wanted to come with me to the bars, but she said no. I got the keys to my dad's truck, but he said I could take it for a spin, and I started going down the driveway. Not even 5 minutes later, I got a call from my dad. I pulled over to the side of the dirt road and answered. "Yeah, Dad, what's up?" My dad was whispering very quietly. "I think that guy from last night is back." "Shit, alright, on my way." I pulled out away and turned around, almost ended up in the ditch and sped towards the driveway. When I got there, I went slowly up the driveway and I pulled in. I reached back and grabbed one of my dad's rifles that he always leaves in his truck under the back seat. I could hear what sounds like someone bashing on the house, and I haven't even come up to the driveway all the way yet. I had to be at least 20 to 30 yards away. I was debating whether or not to get out of the truck when I get another call, this time from my sister, again whispering, "This guy's trying to get into the house. He has an axe, and I think a gun. He's trying to kill us all." In the background, I hear the man scream, "Can't do much now, your daddy drove away." How the hell did he know it was my dad's truck? How long has he been out there, I wondered. My sister screamed on the phone, "He's almost in!" At this point, 1,000 things went through my head, but I knew what I had to do. "Sis, calm down. I'm in the driveway. I have Dad's gun. Is everyone there and okay?" She then replied in a very rushed tone, "Yes, we're fine, and she's fine too." I smiled, because me and my sister are close, so I was glad she included my girlfriend in this. I hopped out of the truck and slammed the door. Then the bashing stopped for a brief second before it continued. It was starting to get dark out, seeing that it was winter time now, and the longer I waited, the darker it seemed. The yard was dimly lit only by 2 light poles, and I could barely see the house. I started making my way up the driveway, gun in hand, and made my way towards one of the other cars in the driveway and crouched behind it. I checked and made sure the rifle was loaded, which it was, and pulled myself out from behind the car and shot near him. I don't know if the bullet hit or not, but I shot anyways and screamed at him, "Get the hell out, asshole!" I don't remember what happened, but I remember feeling a sharp pain from the side of my arm just below my shoulder. He did have a gun, and he just shot at me. Thank God it only scratched me. I ducked back behind the car and he kept shooting. He started laughing hysterically. At this point, I knew he had to have something wrong in his head. When I heard his gun start clicking instead of hearing a shot, I then started shooting back at him, and he started to run into the backyard. I chased him for a bit before I could no longer see him and ran back to the truck. When I got back to the truck, I drove it off the driveway and into the backyard. I switched on all the lights on the truck. This worked well because the truck had a huge light bar. It lit up the whole yard, and I saw the man run into the cornfield and saw the tops of the corn stalks rustle as he kept running. I got out of the truck and kept the lights on. I ran out to the front patio and over the door and tried to open it, but it was locked, and said to everyone inside, "It's okay. He's gone." I looked down at the ground and saw a lot of blood trailing from the door and off the patio and around the back corner into the backyard, and realized I had shot him. I felt bad for it at first because I hoped I didn't kill the guy. That's when I noticed I was bleeding pretty bad as well from where I had been shot. My sister opened the door and hugged me before she realized the blood. I walked into the house and over to the bathroom because we had the med kit there, and I figured I'd get some rubbing alcohol and some gauze and clean up my arms. As I'm walking to the bathroom, I tell my parents to call the cops. From what I remember, I went over to the living room couch and passed out. From what my parents and my sister, my brother, and my girlfriend told me, after I passed out, the police showed up about 10 or 15 minutes after and started to search the area. They had told them what happened, and the police asked if I needed to be taken to the hospital. My family said no, and the police continued searching. What they found made me wish my shot hit something vital. They found where he had been staying for a while, and found a journal full of all his fantasies and other people he had stalked. They also found a camera full of pictures of my house and my parents, my sister, my brother, and me. Even pictures from my girlfriend and cousins arriving. The pictures dated as far back as 3 months back before, and showed pictures of other houses. One of them I recognized as my parents' neighbors because I'd been to their house before. The worst part is, he described wanting to kill my dad, my brother, and I, and wanting to rape my sister, my girlfriend, and my mom before killing them, and moving on to the next house. Thankfully, though, in his journal, he wrote that he had only been successful once. I say thankfully because my family didn't lose their lives to the psycho. It haunts me to know that someone, or maybe a few people, died because of him, and I almost brought them peace. But from what I know, they haven't found him. So, dear axe-wielding psycho that tried to kill the ones I love most in this world, let's not meet. That one time a psycho on a train unleashed my ultimate form. Longtime Reddit lurker, first time poster, and all that jazz. Having recently fallen down the rabbit hole some interesting subs including Reddit Let's Not Meet, I realize I've got many tales I can share. I've taken a look at the rules, but if I do unknowingly break any of the sub or forum rules, I'm happy to edit. I'm pretty sure that I've got this in the correct sub, but if not, again, I'm happy to correct. As I'm a rather long-winded person, when I get going, this will likely be a long one. In order to really paint the picture for you of the scariest event I have ever experienced in my entire life, and to really feel that moment when my blood turned to ice in my veins, I've got to give you a little background on my rather unconventional and fucked up childhood. I'll try to keep this part brief. I'm sure this will sound like utter bullshit to some, but I assure you, it's not. I'm telling the absolute truth, even if it does sound like a badly produced after-school special. My parents kidnapped me from my mother when I was a baby, not because he loved me and couldn't live without me, but because he's a sociopathic douchebag that wanted to hurt my mother as much as he could. I was missing for roughly 6 years, face on the back of a milk carton, the whole nine. My father was an ex-military survivalist that smuggled drugs over the Mexican-American border, amongst other things at the time. During these most formative years of my development, I was surrounded by criminals and raised by this neglectful fucktard. I've had a lot of severe trauma very young. Let's just say that I knew what real monsters were. By the time I was located and returned to my mother just after I turned 7, I knew how to load, clean, and assemble several different types of guns. I knew to aim for the head of the men wearing blue uniforms, and I was a damn good shot with a handgun. I've been left alone for days at a time, repeatedly and often. So, I was completely self-sufficient and could care for myself. I didn't go to school, and had only been around other kids for very rare brief moments in time. I was a feral little beast at this point. I did not trust adults, or anyone for that matter. In my experience, most people were liars and did not show you their true face. Lucky for me, I was returned to a loving home with my mother and stepfather, with love, therapy, and protection by the two of them. I think I turned out to be a relatively normal and surprisingly mentally healthy woman, albeit a few idiosyncrasies. Now, the point of all this preamble is to give you some context regarding the kind of person I am. I am not a victim. I do not take shit from people, and there are very few things in this world that truly terrify me. I'm a motherfucking survivor. Growing up the way I did, I study people intensely as a defense mechanism. I am very good at reading people and their emotions, at times, even the feelings they won't admit to themselves. I have been left with an obsession for my security and those I love. I tend to be hyper-vigilant of my surroundings. There's always a weapon of some type on my person or in my belongings wherever I go, and I take note of every exit and entrance of any place I step into. As a teenager, my stepfather taught me some tricks on how to take down someone that was bigger and or stronger than me. He was a hell-raising biker, and at one time a bartender and bouncer at a rowdy biker bar, so he knew his stuff. You think I would be prepared, right? But the story that I'm trying to get to here was one of the few times in my adult life that someone slipped through all my defenses and nearly got to my young daughters. Now, it's one thing to fear for your own safety, but to fear for the safety of your children, as I'm sure every parent knows it, is something else entirely. It's ice cold, blood curdling, absolutely sneer fucking terror, and I never ever want to experience it again. So, I was living in San Francisco roughly 7 years ago. At the time, I managed a medical office inside a large residential drug rehab center. The residents were a mix of characters, ranging from the homeless and mentally ill to straight up parolees. I actually enjoyed my work and never felt unsafe there, but it was exhausting. It was Friday at the end of a 50-hour work week, and I could not wait to get home and put my feet up. The building I worked in was donated by the Catholic Church and used to be an old convent. It's a 4-story stone giant building, and I ran up and down 3 of those floors all day every day that week. It had been a rough week, and I was deep to the bones tired, as well as mentally fried. It was no quick commute home for me, however. My job was in the Fillmore Lower Haight area, and my babysitter lived near Balboa Park, where I lived in the Sunset District next to SF States. The fastest way home involved walking 2 city blocks to get to a bus, which would drop me near the closest underground station. From there, hop on a train that would take me all the way across the city, nearly to the end of the line. At least the babysitter didn't live far from the line, so I did need to transfer to another bus. Once I had my girls, I would have to wait for the next train to head back down the M line, and finally, a 15 to 20 minute trek on foot to the back of the small city-sized complex where our apartment was. I had made it to the babysitter's house uneventfully and stood waiting for the next train, counting the minutes down until we would be at our front door. This was an above-ground stop, so my habit was to hold the hand of my 7-year-old and heft my 3-year-old toddler on my hip, clamp her up the stairs, and carry her through the train to find a seat. Although she was able to walk, she wasn't so balanced on a moving subway train, as well as being a toddler, so she tended to fall over and become easily distracted by the other people on the train. Strollers seem to be more of a pain in the ass than they are helpful when dealing with public transit, so this had become my routine. Looking back, I'm sure I look like an easy target. It's not like I present as this badass, hardened and grizzled person. There's really nothing intimidating about me, I don't think. I knew I had balls of steel, but unless you challenged me, no one else would. I was a 27-year-old exhausted single mother, just trying to get home with my kids and belongings in tow. We were on the final leg of the journey home, and being so tired and wiped out, my defenses were down. So when I managed to get up the stairs onto the train and realized that the car was empty except for one homeless man, I just did not feel it was worth it to continue through the train cars to more populated areas. I observed this guy and quickly took a mental note of him, as was my habit. He was at the end of the train in the last car, right next to and opposite the door I entered from. He didn't look to be something I should be afraid of. Remember, I worked with this population every day, and I knew that most of these people are nothing to be scared of. In my experience, most of these guys just had a shitty life, followed by a series of bad decisions and or an inability to learn from their own mistakes. In fact, when I was traveling on my own, it was a habit of mine to sit down in the empty seat next to a homeless person that no one else would take and strike up a conversation. If you ever want to see the true joys in the eyes of another human, sit down next to a homeless person and talk to them like a regular person. You'll make their day. But I digress. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, unkempt, shaggy dark hair and a scruffy facial hair. wearing several layers of raggedy stained clothes with an oversized coat that hung past his knees. He had a tall can of beer in his hand. I noticed that, but didn't seem overly attentive to my presence. Even though this man didn't set off any fear response for me, I was not in the mood to deal with an intoxicated hobo with my girls tonight, so I headed up the train, hoping I'd make it onto the next car before we started moving. No such luck. Being the only group that got on the train at the stop, the train pulled off quickly, and I only made it near the end of this car, balancing a tot on one hip, holding the hand of the other, and all the weight of bags and purses on the other shoulder. I just kinda dropped and wilted into the empty seats we were next to at the front of the car. We didn't have to go far now, and I could see from my vantage point 2 people on the car ahead of me. I was in the habit of placing my girls on one seat to situate bags, and I always sat in the aisle seat as a protective measure. While we were getting settled, the train gets going. I hear this guy in the back start singing to himself. Honestly, I don't remember what. I just remember he seemed happy. I had filed this man away in my brain as just another homeless guy riding the train at night on a loop to stay warm, which they did often. Most of the time, they didn't bother anyone because they didn't want to get kicked off the train. I figured he had panhandled enough that night for a beer and a ticket, and I did not begrudge him a little joy and warmth, as long as he stayed away from my kids. As I'm sitting there attending to my girls, kind of half aware of the hobo in the back, I slowly register that his singing was getting a little louder, more boisterous and closer. I glance over my shoulder to see he is hobbling our direction and looking at my toddler, who is peeking at him over the back of the seat. As she's sitting on her knees, I start to pay a little more attention to his whereabouts. But again, there's nothing that says to me he's dangerous. I have no problem enforcing boundaries with strangers in public, but I also have a lot of compassion for these guys. After all, with a couple different turns in my own past, that could have been me. It's apparent this guy has had more than one tall boy that night, as he's sort of swaying and slurring his words, but he appears to be singing for my little tot because she is tickled pink, giggling and smile. The more animated his song becomes, I study his face, but his smile doesn't seem creepy at all to me. He honestly doesn't seem like a possible Chester to me or have any ill intent. He just seemed to enjoy entertaining an adorable little girl. Maybe he had kids of his own somewhere that he missed, or maybe he was just lonely. Even so, I didn't want to engage with this guy and encourage him, so I was paying a little more attention to what he was doing now, out of my peripheral vision. By this time, he had made it pretty close to us, and dropped into the bench seat that was a couple rows on the opposite side of us, roughly 7 feet away. We were sitting in the forward-facing seats at the front of the car. Now, I was wary, but still not afraid or skeeved out by this guy. He starts chatting at me at this point. In his slurred speech, he says, "Beautiful family you got there. You're a lucky mom to have such cute kids." I'm not really in the mood to talk to anyone right now, but as I said, I have too much compassion for people down on their luck, so I just politely say, "Thank you," without turning around. Still slurring, he launches into a tale about the family he used to have and everything that went wrong in his life. It doesn't seem to matter to him that I'm not really engaging, but he's not coming any closer to us, so I don't stop him or interrupt. Now, what happens next is my first inkling that this guy may not be what he seems. It's not so much what he says that does it, but the sudden shift in tone and personality. He's not slurring anymore. The volume of his voice has dropped a bit, and the tone of his voice changes to this Hannibal Lecter smugness. He's not talking to me anymore, but at my tot, who is peeking at him again over my shoulder. "Hello, little girl." Now this guy had my full attention. Every cell in my body is saying, pay attention to this hello Clarence motherfucker. I look over my shoulder to look directly at him and really assess his demeanor. His joviality seemed to be gone, and I don't see a happy hobo anymore, but a leering grin on his face that doesn't reach his dead-looking brown eyes. He's looking at my littlest tot, But then as he shifts his eyes to look at my 7-year-old, who is also staring at him, although looking less entertained than her sister. This is the moment my blood runs cold. In that same Hannibal tone of voice, still not slurring, he says, "Who aren't you, the pretty one? Such pretty white skin. So sexy." I'm not looking directly at him when he says this, and what I see in his face has me friggin' terrified. I do not like the way he's looking at my daughter like she's a piece of meat. He then realizes I am looking at him, and shifts his eyes to look at me now and grins a little wider to show me a perfectly white intact smile that seems incongruent with the rest of his getup. I also notice that while his attire is dirty, he himself seems pretty clean, and his scruffy facial hair has a distinct line that he shaved away with purpose. Now, maybe I'm just paranoid due to my past. Maybe this guy had gotten free dental work. Maybe he had showered at a shelter, but had nothing clean to put back on. Maybe he had gotten a free shave from a barber giving back. There are plenty of plausible explanations for what I observed, but it's when I lock eyes with this guy that alarm bells go off in my head. What kind of man calls a 7-year-old sexy? And why did his demeanor seem to change so suddenly? Why did he seem perfectly sober? I have absolutely no doubt this man is a predator. My intuition, which I completely trust, says get the hell away from this guy now. All this on goes in my head in nanoseconds. I stand up to pick up my bags, adrenaline surging, heft the little one back to my hip, grab the hand of my oldest, and head for the door of the car. Because I want the two people in the car ahead of me to hear, I wait for the doors to open before I turn back to him and loudly with my mama bear authority say, "You stay away from us." I didn't care if I was wrong in my assumption, and I didn't care anymore if I hurt his feelings. I lumber to the front of this car, and again, sit in the very front forward seats. I don't go any further, because this happens to be a long train with probably 6 or 7 cars, and I don't see anybody on the next couple of cars from my vantage point. I want to stay with the other passengers. It's not unusual for the train to be this empty this far away from downtown, and at this time of night, in between the commute rush and the Friday nightclub crowd. I'm used to disembarking alone, or with very few others at my stop when I work this late. I'm starting to panic at this point about what I would do at my stop coming up. It's also on the part of the line that is still above ground, and I'm not going to have a crowd of people to get lost in. The creep could easily follow me on my walk through the complex, and either attack me alone or follow me home. Because I'm pondering my predicament and literally terrified, I don't immediately register that the people who were on the car with me have gone off the train and I am now alone again. Several minutes go by, and we're getting close to our stop, when I hear the whoosh of the car doors opening behind me. Please be another passenger, I'm praying to myself, before I look behind me. Nope, it's creepy Hannibal Hobo, heading towards me again. But this time he's glaring at me. No more smile, no more singing, no more slurring. Just an evil glare as he plods my direction. He got his left hand up on the overhead bar with his right hand seeming to hold on to something inside his jacket as he plods towards me. My stomach drops into my toes and my heart leaps into my throat. We are all alone, several cars behind anyone I can see. I don't wait to find out what he's got in his jacket. I hadn't set down any bags this time. They were still over my shoulder, and I was still holding my youngest, so I grab the hand of my oldest and tell her we need to get to the front. I can tell she is scared now too, but I'm trying not to frighten her too bad. I kind of push and pull her gently in front of me, thinking if I can get to the front car even if it's empty, I'll be right behind the conductor. I'm going as fast as I can, which isn't very fast with everything I'm juggling. As I'm nearing the doors again, I can see that the next car is empty, but the next car has people. I'm almost there. As long as he doesn't catch up to us, we should be safe. We are now almost to my stop, and the train is slowing down again. I hear the door whoosh open again, behind me this time. Fuck. I glance over my shoulder to see the guys friggin' running at me. Jesus Christ. I've never been so friggin' terrified in my entire life. I move ahead as fast as I can into the next car, but I know I'm not going to make it to the next one filled with other people, and no one seems to be looking this way from the car ahead, and the train is pulling into the stop. This is that moment when time just seemed to slow down. I'm thinking this guy plans to cut my head off with no hands to defend myself, and he's gonna run off the stopping train with one or both of my girls. Now my adrenaline is surging, and I can feel my heart thumping at warp speed. Boom, 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 boom. I drop the bags from my shoulder, not giving one fuck about what's in them now. I need free movement. I tell my 7-year-old to stay behind me as I squat down to plot my youngest on the train floor. In one motion, I turn around, raise up, pull my pocket knife out of my back pocket, and flip it open, taking a wide-legged defensive stand. I don't know if it was the security of my knife in my hand or that one final surge of adrenaline, but I swear to God, as I stood up, I grew. I felt like Mario having gotten his mushroom. I felt invincible, 3 times my size and superhuman. No one was going to get through to my babies, even if I was going to get stabbed. He stopped dead in his tracks when he sees the knife about 5 feet in front of me. I sway a bit with the brake on the train, bringing it to a halt, but keep my footing. Without thinking, I scream at this guy. Take one more fucking step, and I'll cut your balls and fucking choke you with them. I see his eyes widen at this. He obviously did not expect this kind of a reaction. He looks in my eyes, looks at the knife, looks behind me at my kids, and one more time glances back to my eyes. Then he turns tail and runs out the open doors and off the train. I barely register a couple of college students by the look of them hop onto my car and immediately hop off. Probably because I'm still standing there looking like a psycho with a knife out. I hear the dang and swoosh of the doors closing again, and the train moves on. At this point, I just kinda crumpled to the floor and hugged my kids to me and burst into tears. My oldest is crying too, while her little sister is just completely bewildered. I didn't move from the floor until we pulled into the next stop at West Portal, where we disembarked, and I called my roommates and best friend. He was a man with big biceps and uncanny strength for his size. I wanted him to meet me at the train stop so we didn't have to walk through the complex alone in the dark after this craziness, which of course he did, because he's amazing like that. I never stayed on an empty train after that. No matter how tired I am, I will move to a car full of people. I never saw Hannibal Hobo again either, and I don't care to. I don't think he ever wants to meet me again either.